there. You are now listening to Resilience with Dhruti Shah, a podcast that brings you stories of grit and growth from leaders and dreamers across the globe. Stay tuned for today's guest.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Resilience with Dhruti Shah. Today's guest knows a thing or two about stress, mostly because she has made it her mission to help people beat stress before it beats them. We've got Rachel Austen on the podcast, a chartered occupational psychologist and leadership coach I've known for a while, and she is just incredible. After going through burnout herself, she built Aura, AURA, a science backed tool that helps people spot stress before it spirals. Now she's helping organizations create happier, healthier workplaces. And when she's not busy doing that, she is off recharging in nature or planning her next adventure. So let's jump in and talk about what resilience really looks like when life gets loud.
Hi, Rachel. It is such a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Dhruti. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Rachel, we've known each other since quite some time, and we started off with a virtual connection. Very recently, we met up and caught up over a cup of coffee. But the one thing that I've really been always curious about is your 2015 burnout. And as we've been talking, it's something that crept up suddenly for you, which sounds paradoxical, right? So can you take us back to that moment when you realized that something was seriously wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, it was in 2015, quite a long time ago now, but still quite fresh in my mind because it was a very difficult time for me. Um, so at the time I was living in Hong Kong. I was living a very busy life, but what I thought was quite a full life. I was full of work, but also social things, lots of travel, lots of exercise, and kind of a go, go, go lifestyle. Um, and so I had just been on a work trip to Papua New Guinea, actually. An interesting destination. And I got back, and it had been after a long period of quite intensive work, actually. And one night I just collapsed in the night, and I had sort of a raging fever. I don't really remember it too well because I was so delirious, and I mean I had a fever like I've never had before. I thought my whole body was about to break. And this continued for several days. And I went to the doctor, and I thought maybe I'd picked up a tropical disease
Right.
in Papua New Guinea, and I was tested for malaria and some other diseases, and actually that was negative. And I thought, no, it's odd. It's like, what's happening to me?
Yeah.
Um, and basically, I mean, I must have picked up some form of infection or something, but what was at the core of it was my body was in such a state of low resilience, or such a low immunity, that my whole body had just kind of broken down. And I think maybe I had picked up some form of infection, maybe when I was in Papua New Guinea. But that wasn't really the core of the problem. The core of the problem was my body was so exhausted, I wasn't able to cope with this infection or whatever it was, that normally I would have probably batted off in an instant. So I mean, that was really when I realized, something was wrong. Obviously, because that was an enforced pause physically. I was in bed for
Mm.
several weeks, sort of dealing with these fevers, or not dealing with them, but resting, coping with them. Um, but then that was also this kind of enforced pause gave me the headspace to think, gosh, how have I got to this state of um, sort of physical exhaustion, really?
Mhm.
And it gave me that kind of headspace to reflect and think about how I'd the pressures I was under and how I'd been feeling over the recent months and also years actually. And I sort of realized, gosh, actually, like I've not really been my myself for a long time. So when I say the burnout crept up on me, physically it crept up on me, the awareness crept up on me all of a sudden, but actually those warning signs had been there for probably a good couple of years, very slowly and subtly building up, but I hadn't really noticed. I mean, burnout doesn't happen overnight. That's something I've learned and understood since my experience, and I think that's what a lot of people need to understand. You hear a lot of people sort of saying, "Oh gosh, I feel so burnt out this week," and then the next
Mm-hmm.
day they sort of feel, "Oh no, I'm okay now." But that's not really how it works. That's not true burnout. That might just be kind of temporary stress.
That's
Um,
right.
but actual burnout really does take a long time to build up and actually fully manifest in that complete physical and emotional exhaustion like I had at that point.
Yeah. You used the word resilience, right, in what you said. Can you just tell me real quick, what does resilience mean for you? How do you define it?
Yeah, and it's resilience is almost overused these days, isn't it? And
Mhm.
sometimes has a bit of a negative connotation. People go, "Oh, you burnt out because you're not resilient enough,"
Mm.
and it's not really about that. But for me, being in a resilient state, and I do believe it's a state, not a trait in a
Mhm.
person, is when you're able to cope with challenges. That come along and when you're able to come back from those challenges in a positive way but also adapt and grow from those challenges. So I think when you're it's about your emotional resilience and having the mental skills, but it's also about having that physical resilience as well. And for me, at that point, I was so impacted negatively by stress that had been impairing my body's ability to function properly, that my ability to cope with, in my context, that infection or that illness that came along was just not there. So I think I didn't have the physical resilience, but also, I had very low kind of mental resilience then as well. I couldn't think straight. My brain literally wasn't working properly, and I had lots of other symptoms that stress had been having that negative impact. So I think I'm not saying that resilience is the only thing you need to do to prevent burnout. It's also about managing the stress. But for
Of
me,
course.
resilience is that being in that state of being able to bounce back from those challenges
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. And you mentioned three things there, right? One was the physical, the emotional, and the mental aspect of resilience, right? And I think each one requires a strategy in itself to bounce back, as I can only imagine. um,
Yeah.
you've had this, you had the burnout, you had the physical manifestation of the stress that you were suffering from, and you said a few weeks in order to recover from that. And but it's a long, vulnerable journey in that sense, right? So what kept you going during that time? How did you continue plowing through?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think for me it was a lot of experimentation, and it was frustrating at the beginning because I was so used to doing so many things and being able to function on a different level. When at
Yeah.
that point I literally couldn't function at all, and even leaving the house was a struggle because I just didn't have any energy to do the things I could normally do. So. Um, I mean, I think the first thing that really helped for me was movement. So, and that was not only for my physical recovery, but also for my mental recovery as well. And I use the word movement rather than exercise or working out
Yeah.
because for me, I what really worked was actually starting a yoga practice. And I'd done maybe a couple of classes now and then before then, but not regularly. But I started going to yoga classes, and I really found the slow, gentle mindful movement that comes with yoga, together with the deep breathing that you do in that class, just was so restorative for me. And in the yoga classes I went to, there was always a little bit of meditation and kind of mindful practice mentally as well. So I sort of suddenly realized, gosh, I previously had never made any time to kind of check in with my body, to connect with what was going on in my inner world. And so for me, the mental benefits were really helpful from that perspective. And there's a lot of science actually behind. I now kind of understand why it was so helpful. When your body is burnt out and in that state, your whole nervous system is just out of balance. So
Yep.
it's sort of recalibrated into this emergency state all the time, and your body doesn't really have any window to rest or restore. So yoga really helps you train your body to kind of reset um, that ability to change its state into that rest and restore state that we all need to be in to recover from the daily stresses that we all face every day. So I think over time I really noticed those benefits, that I was actually able to train my body to restore and repair, and over time rebalance my nervous system.
Yeah. So what it sounds like, from being a busybody, you became someone who actually intentionally, deliberately took a pause, recalibrate and keep moving forward, but with intention of slowing down in that sense too, right?
Totally, yeah. I think that's, it really did train me to learn how to slow down, because I mean, I'm a probably type A, maybe not a type A person, but definitely a sort of overachiever. I'm very positive and optimistic. And I remember my first employer looking at my personality profile and telling me how I had a very optimistic personality, and that,
Mhm.
one day that wasn't going to be very good for me because I could be unrealistic, about what
Wow.
I could achieve. And I remember thinking, oh, I think being positive and optimistic is a good thing. But looking
Yeah.
back on that, I do see how that has sort of derailed me or harmed me somewhat, because I
Yeah.
do have a strong mind and sometimes I do set myself unrealistic goals. So for me, my recovery from burnout was also kind of resetting those expectations about what I could achieve each day and what I needed to achieve each day, and
Yeah.
what success looked like for me from a day, as opposed to filling it um, with lots of things and never having any downtime to rest and restore.
Restore.
So
Yeah.
definitely that slowing down piece was really important, together with the physical practice of the movement. And as I said, I think it was also about that body mind connection, that I
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
carving out time and space to have that. Um, and I think the other thing that really helped me during that recovery process was the social support.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of evidence in psychology that shows actually feeling socially connected to others and supported by others is one of the strongest predictors of resilience.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think creating that support system really makes all the difference, right? And it sounds like
Yeah.
you changed the narrative for yourself as well.
Yeah, and I was really lucky in that I had an amazing network of friends who, despite me probably being not a very attentive friend for a long time when I was going into that burnout, and not intentionally, but just I didn't really have the emotional energy to kind of be there for all my friends and spend a lot of time with them. And I started socially isolating myself and saying no to doing things. But they, luckily for me, were there for me and gave me a lot of support during that difficult time. And looking back on that, that was absolutely fundamental for me to have that feeling of support and connection. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And clearly it can make all the difference, right? So you've, you've lived in Hong Kong, you lived in the UK, and of course worked there as well. And you continue working with leaders globally on this subject.
Mm.
Have you noticed how burnout manifests in different cultures? Have you seen it being similar, different, uh, and maybe the response to it?
Um, yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm actually asked that quite a lot because I do work, as you say, with companies now and individuals to help them recognize the warning signs of burnout, and I have a tool to do that. And so I'm actually very lucky in that I've been able to gather lots of data into people's burnout
Mm,
signs from lots of different countries and cultures. Um, I think the first thing is it's important to remember it's more about individual differences in terms
mm,
of burnout manifestations. I think what I've seen anyway in the data is it's those individual differences that are actually more pronounced than general kind of cultural differences.
mm-hmm,
Um, but I have seen in my data set anyway, which is actually quite large now, some patterns between Asian cultures and Western cultures.
mm-hmm,
And I think one of the biggest things we see in the data um, is the thinking pattern in Asia to be really self-critical, to beat yourself up.
mm,
Um, when things don't go perfectly, to kind of blame yourself, and those I ask some questions to tap into those specific thinking patterns that we know actually develop under stress, but it's actually we see those reported a lot more in the Asian cultures as some of the top signs and symptoms, significantly more so than we do in the Western cultures.
mm-hmm.
So that kind of self critical attitudes that set in and thinking patterns. And that for me kind of makes sense from a cultural perspective in many Asian countries, not all of them, but this the idea of kind of saving face is very important and people not wanting to show their struggles. And we also asked a question in my assessment tool about um, the extent that they don't share that people don't share their challenges or want to
Mm-hmm.
share their struggles, which is certainly something that tends to happen during burnout. And we actually see that lack of willingness to speak up as more pronounced in Asian cultures as well. So I think for me the interesting thing or the worrying thing, if you like, is that when people do that, that really leads to bottling up your feelings, to holding them inside and not letting them out. When what we know from the stress research is that we need to process those emotions and let them
Yeah.
out. And stress is like food, right? What comes in has to come out the other end. So we need to do something to get those stress hormones out of us. So bottling up
Mm-hmm.
your feelings is probably one of the worst things that you can do. Um, but I think it's not all about country culture. A lot of it actually also has to do with the culture of the company you work in.
Of
And
course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've worked with some companies in Asia where actually they have very open conversation and through some of these other systems and cultures they have in place in their organization, they do talk more openly about their struggles, but you need a high degree of psychological safety in that environment to encourage that.
Yeah, absolutely. And uh, that leads to a whole different discussion in terms of how, as leaders, you can support your folks better, your team members better when it comes to building their
Mm,
resilience. I think creating that psychological safety, coming from a place of respect, trust. I think there's just so much that leaders can do in order to keep them going, keep the conversation going. And I think normalize the idea that it's okay to be stressed. Let's talk about it.
yeah, and that this what you just said there about kind of normalizing this idea is so critical because for me, one of the biggest things I see is that stress has just being stressed has become normalized, as
Mm.
in or being too stressed. So
Okay.
one of the key problems I believe is that people don't understand when their stress levels have reached unhealthy levels. because some stress is good, right? It's positive, it energizes, it motivates you, it focuses you on achieving your goals. And when it's
Mhm.
managed well and when you recover well from it, it's not a problem and it's a helpful thing. But when it accumulates and builds up and it's not managed properly, or when you're under far too much stress and exposed to chronic stressors that are just there all the time,
Yeah.
then it can have a negative impact. And I think because everybody else is also experiencing some of those early signs of burnout or those negative impacts of stress, then
Hmm.
people don't realize, what a healthy benchmark looks like. Um, and I think for me, when I burnt out, that was one of the biggest things. I several months later sort of thought, gosh, I feel so different now, and I feel so much. I wasn't fully well, but I feel so much better than I did. That this is what it should feel like to
Yeah,
to, to not
that's
be
what we need to
stressed all the
normalize.
time. That's what I
Exactly.
need to be aiming for, not
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Um, so I do think, and that's partly why I created my tool, was to actually enable people to have a healthy benchmark
Yeah.
to measure themselves against. What it's not about measuring themselves against others in their business, it's about
Mm,
measuring themselves against a healthy standard,
that's
in
right.
terms of stress.
And I've seen your tool, right? And we've spoken in detail in the past about it. I think it's one of those things where you really need to look inward rather than looking outside, So I think it really kind of prompts you, nudges you to look inside and really reflect as compared to, oh, but my colleague or my team member or my leader, right? We don't need to go there. I think that, and that's where um, I believe one of the things that even in my research as I was writing the book was that purpose can really be an anchor for resilience, right?
Mm.
And as you navigated your journey from occupational psychologist to founder, I'm just curious what personal values kept you grounded when things got really tough? Because I'm sure the journey just started in 2015, right? And it's an ongoing one at that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as I said, my highly optimistic personality style thought, sure, I can just start a business and make it work. Um, and look, I mean, at the end of the day, I started my company to have more time and a nicer life as opposed to
Mhm.
going for world domination. But I think one thing that I really, really set out to do was um, to help other people recognize the signs of burnout early before they got to the point that I had got to. Um, and not only that, to help businesses recognize early when their people were under too much strain and stress,
Mhm.
and then use that as a indicator to really start some open, good conversations around how can they actually tackle the root causes of stress in the work environment and create healthier places to work. So for me, I really just kept, the more I learned about burnout, I sort of looked around me and thought, oh my gosh, everybody is struggling with stress to some degree,
Mm.
and on this path towards the burnout. So that was, I think it was that purpose. I really, really believed in it, that fueled me through those difficult times. And back then, when I first started this idea to sort of go and measure stress levels and burnout risk levels and have open conversations and in companies about it, I no one was really talking about burnout back then in sort of 2015 and 16, and there was actually quite a big stigma about sort of
That's right.
admitting whether,
Yeah.
gosh, no, our people aren't stressed and you can't talk. I had to literally had these senior managers say, but yeah, we get it. Like I can now see from your model, yeah, our people are definitely in this red alert. So, or
Hmm.
lots of them are, but we can't talk about it. Um, and there was this stigma of it. Yeah, we don't really talk about that. We just sort of brush it under the carpet. And that was truly a lot of people's attitudes at the time to it. But I think
And this
now,
was, sorry, but this was true globally. Is this something you observed everywhere?
well, I was still working in Hong Kong actually. So
Okay.
But I was working with global companies, so this wasn't it, there was global leaders there from all over the world.
Okay, so then yeah,
So
I
yeah,
think
I
then
was
it's
I
just the
was
overall
working,
attitude. Yeah.
yeah, different attitudes, but I think sort of back to your question, I think, having some of those conversations was quite demoralizing, and I got
Mm,
rejections for the kind of my proposals and things. But so I did definitely go through the phase where I thought, oh, maybe I should just, give up on this idea.
mm.
Maybe it's not a good idea. But something in me, this purpose, I think, really just kind of fueled me through those rejections and helped me keep going. And I think, as you say, that purpose is such an anchor for resilience, because it's when you have that North Star to aim towards, you know why you're doing what you're doing. So it makes you keep on going one small step at a time.
Absolutely. And you mentioned one of the things that kept you going back a decade ago, right? Was movements, and you had embraced yoga. Are there any other things that you've embraced right now in order to keep you resilient?
Yeah, it's no, thank you for asking that. It's a good question. I think, you know, resilience, well, what I've learned anyway, is resilience isn't something that you have, it's something that you do. So
Mm.
it's a constant practice.
Mm.
It's like physical fitness. You don't
Yeah.
just, well, you can have that as a state, right? But you have
Yeah,
to keep on going to the
that's
gym or
right.
doing your exercise and working on it. And so I think for me with resilience, it's something that you keep on evolving and learning as well, how to manage your resilience. But yeah, yoga for me opened up a whole kind of arena of strategies that I now have integrated into my life. I still do a bit of yoga, but also it kind of opened me up to meditation as something that I do every day. Um, and also, I think that probably the biggest thing for me has been discovering how to manage my energy system. So I didn't really know anything about energy systems.
Mm.
Well, definitely when I burnt out in 2015, but it's only really in the last few years I've learned about it, and I came across a Korean practice called Sungkyon, which is a method for changing your vibration and kind of connecting with the universal energy source that
Mm.
is actually all around us. It's just vibration. And they have various methods for doing some practices, which are through meditations and chanting and also managing your thoughts in your mind, um, so that when you are uh, at the right vibration or frequency, then you can tap into this rich source of energy, this invisible source of energy that's all around you.
Mm.
Um, and it's actually the energy of nature. Um, some people call this energy, the universe or life force energy, but it's also the energy of nature, which is this slow kind of nourishing energy. Um, I think during my recovery from burnout, I naturally veered towards spending more time in nature. I did a lot of hiking. Um I went to the beach a lot and by the sea in Hong Kong, and I loved being out in nature, and I found it really restorative, but I didn't really know why. And now further down the line, I've really kind of discovered this method of how to intentionally tap into that vibration and recharge, and it's been really powerful and transformational actually for me in terms of managing my resilience and kind of and particularly from an energy perspective.
That's amazing. So it's not just about tapping what you have inside of you, but also receiving from the universe in that sense, right? The energy that you're talking about.
Yeah,
And it's such a powerful concept because again, um, one of the things which we always discuss, whether you're a leader or whoever you are, right, is that you're not alone in this. And I think in this sense, you were also saying that I think the universe is waiting to provide you with all that you need in order to continue going if you're ready to receive it, right? So I
yeah.
think that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
No, yeah, it is. It is really about that connection, but as you say, it's about the connection to yourself, going inside and being aligned to your true self and your inner values. And
Mm.
it's that piece which is obviously very important, but it's also that connection to the universe outside and being
Yeah,
ready to
absolutely.
receive and give back. Yeah.
That's right. And, you know, talking about where we are today, there's so much uncertainty, and not just in one front, but at multiple fronts, right? So, what do you think when we're looking ahead? What is the biggest resilience challenge for us, you know, as you look at the next 5 years, maybe? Because when you think about it,
Mm.
is it artificial intelligence and the challenges that come with it? Or do you believe it's something to do with climate anxiety or the geopolitics or the erosion of boundaries between work and life, like, or something else? Like, what comes to mind as you think about it? Or maybe all of the
Oh,
above.
wow. Oh, I think all of those are huge challenges, aren't they? That everyone needs to be concerned about. But I actually think the biggest resilience challenge for everybody actually is this disconnection. And
Mm,
that sort of relates to what I was just talking about. And what I mean by that is I think we live in this world of accelerating technology, AI, constant notifications. We were just talking about that just before, you just get pinged from all angles.
yeah.
Um, and as you say, these blurred boundaries between work and home.
Yeah.
And so people are more digitally connected than ever. So when I say disconnection, we are connected through technology much more than ever, but we've actually become much more disconnected from ourselves.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, and I think it's actually that is absolutely so dangerous because over the
Mm,
next 5 years, that pressure and that pace of technological change is only going to increase. So
mm,
I think people are more and more just going to be caught up in either the busyness of just trying to keep up with every day,
yeah.
but when they're not working or um, engaging in their kind of personal life activities, um, then many people are sort of lost in this virtual world. They're scrolling on Instagram or they're reading content online, and so there's no time where people in general have to, or they don't make time to have what this psychologist calls the third space, which is this time for reflection,
Hmm.
um, and to go inside and kind of connect with yourself and to track yourself and monitor yourself and think, oh, how did today go? How am I feeling? And oh, what did I learn from today? What do I want to do tomorrow? So it's that reflective space between kind of what we've just done and what we need to do next, which I think is missing. Um,
Yeah.
and it's quite interesting, this sort of idea of the third space. And you could link that back to kind of ancient times or older times, not just ancient, but where
Mm,
people had that kind of physical third space and through of maybe going to church or a religious practice, not only
mm,
religion, but they had some time, maybe it was a Sunday service they went to or something like that,
yeah.
where they intentionally kind of had that reflection space.
Hmm.
And I just think all the pressures of the modern world and the pace of change and everything else that we have to deal with is just fueling that disconnection. And when
Yeah.
we're disconnected, we're not in general living in life in line with our values and what's important to us, but we will also have lost that um connection to what's going on inside and those signals that maybe you are going down the path to burnout or maybe stress is having a negative impact. So if you're not connecting with yourself or aware of how you're feeling, then
Hmm.
that's really dangerous.
No, that's true. And, you know, to end our conversation, I think what would really be helpful is be again bringing us back to where we started. You know, you mentioned that there are three kinds of resilience that we talked about. You know, your physical, your mental, and your emotional resilience. If you can, based on your experience, your research, or maybe your personal story as well, uh, if you can share maybe one tip to build each type of resilience, that would be really great if you could do that. So, a tip to
Mm.
build your physical resilience, a tip to build your emotional and mental resilience, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. I'll start with physical.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've talked about movement, but I think it's not just about the movement. I think the biggest thing to support your physical resilience is actually learning how to regulate your nervous system.
Mm,
And that sounds like a big topic,
it
but
does.
it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be big. And I'm all about simple actually. But one of the quickest ways to regulate your nervous system, when I mean regulate, I mean training yourself or having some intentional ways to flip your state from
Mm-hmm.
stress state to rest and restore state.
Mm-hmm.
Because all the stresses around us, if we're not careful or not intentional about it, will just trigger us to be in this stress state all the time.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest or the easiest way to do it is literally through the breath. So the breath is like pressing the brake pedal on a car.
Mm,
Um, and it's really the a long exhale, which signals to your nervous system, okay, it's safe now. So
mm,
I think quite like the phrase, when in doubt, breathe it out. So if you ever sort of feel that sort of surge of stress, maybe you get an email or something triggers it, just like a long kind of
yeah,
for a few seconds, count for 5 or 6 seconds, is
that's
just an instant or almost instant way of signaling to your body that it's safe and changing your state into that rest and restore state. Um, so I think, that's one tip I could give, just to learn how to use the breath, which is a free resource that we all have to
right.
calm down in the moment and manage that stress, because we
Mm-hmm.
do need to be managing it and regulating our system on a daily basis,
Yeah,
to be able to keep it in balance.
absolutely.
So I think that's the sort of the physical one. Mental, I think. Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about going inside and having time for stillness. I do think it is about, I'm not one to kind of prescribe a perfect morning routine or um or a daily routine or things everybody should do, because it's always quite personal, what's going to work for one doesn't always work for the other. But I think making some time in your day for reflection, whether that's through journaling, whether that's just a bit of stillness, maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
going for a mindful walk with no
Mm-hmm.
phone, and paying attention and checking in with yourself and thinking about how you're feeling, is helpful. Um, or maybe it's through meditation and just having some time just to meditate
Yeah.
and be with yourself and
Mm,
tune in to how you're feeling. So I think it's that intentional practice to encourage yourself to reflect on how you're feeling and build that self-awareness, is really important. Um, so that
for
would
your mental
be
resilience, yeah.
for your mental resilience, yeah. And then emotionally, which is sort of, I guess, part of mental resilience, but I think emotionally, um, one of the most powerful um, emotions, to put yourself into a positive state is gratitude. So actually just practicing gratitude, and whether that's literally just, as you're cleaning your teeth, thinking about, oh gosh, I'm actually really grateful to have a roof over my head today, or for my life, or even small things, for that nice cup of coffee that I'm just about to drink.
Mm,
It's just that practice of just being grateful, actually changes your vibration. Again, gratitude is a very, very strong positive vibration, and you will put yourself into a different mental state, which will then um change how you feel for the rest of the day.
That's right. Oh, that's beautiful. So, to bring it all together, right? When we think about physical resilience, breathe. When
Yeah.
in doubt, breathe out. I love that. When you're thinking about mental resilience, it's about just, reflecting, however you need to do that, right? And I think when it comes to emotional resilience, gratitude. So I think these
Mm.
are three very powerful tips. And uh, having done it myself in one way or the other, I can guarantee that if we are able to do that and form a habit for ourselves, I think that just goes a really long way in building our resilience.
Mm.
So absolutely. Any before we end our discussion, Rachel, is there anything else that you would want to share that will help the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, as I think you hit the nail on the head, Druti, in that it's about habit. And so building your resilience is it can feel kind of overwhelming sometimes because there's so many things you can do. But it's much more about consistency
Mm,
than doing lots of different things. So I
mm,
when I work with individuals, they come up with these long lists of new habits that or new strategies they're gonna try, and then they don't do any of it because it's hard to build a new habit. So
Overwhelming, isn't it,
it's
at
so
times?
totally overwhelming. So it's about starting small, um, and just doing that consistently. And I would say just start with one tiny, tiny thing. Do that and then reflect, well, how did that make me feel? And it's
Mm,
through that process then you start to sort of build this toolkit of new habits and rewire your brain and also your behavior to ultimately then it will just start to be your day to day. But yeah, it's definitely just about setting yourself tiny, small, achievable goals and not trying to overwhelm yourself with trying to do too many things
yeah.
at once.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been an absolute pleasure. As usual, I love having this conversation with you. And I think one line that I would want to end it with is resilience is a state, not a trait. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh no, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, always love talking to you, Juicy, and we always have a great conversation.
Yep. I'll see you around soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Wow, Ramina, that was such a grounding chat with Rachel, wasn't it?
Yes. And I feel like I need to go and breathe it out for a bit now.
Mm-hmm.
Like a long exhale, right, Rati?
Oh, absolutely. And as Rachel said, when in doubt, breathe it out. I think that's going to be our new team motto.
Yep. Let's go for that. And I was love how she said resilience isn't something that you're born with. I think I completely agree with that. It's something that you practice, put in the work, right? Somewhat,
Mhm.
maybe like gym reps for your nervous system.
Yeah, and the magic is in the consistency as well. And the word reps that you said is like the key word over here. And also, it's about building up on the smaller things, right? We don't have to go for something grand. It's the small little things like the pauses,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
showing gratitude, slowing down intentionally. I think those are such important things. And when you think about it, sometimes resilience looks less like doing more and more like just take a break.
Yeah. So technically, Dhruti, if I take a nap now, it's me building resilience, right?
Sure, why not? But I'm not going to call it a nap. I'm going to call it a resilience recharge.
There you go. Yep. Works for me.
Yeah. So that's it for today's episode of Resilience with Dhruti Shah. Take that long exhale, find a moment of stillness, and remember, even small steps count towards a stronger you. Until we meet again, take care. This is Dhruti Shah signing off. Bye bye.